Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
Condo board's window washing controversy explored. I never imagined I'd find myself sitting in a crowded condo meeting, staring at a PowerPoint slide of a crane, wondering how my life had come to this. But there I was, sandwiched between Mrs. Henderson, who smelled faintly of lavender and mothballs, and Mr. Grayson, who kept muttering under his breath about wasteful spending. The slide on the screen showed a sleek, futuristic-looking crane attached to the side of our building, and the words, "Window Washing Efficiency," in bold letters underneath. The Homeowners Association president, Linda, stood at the front of the room, beaming like she'd just discovered the cure for dirty windows. As you all know, Linda began, her voice dripping with enthusiasm, "Our current window washing system is outdated and inefficient. The new cranes will not only modernize our building but also ensure that our windows are cleaned safely and thoroughly twice a year. This is a necessary investment in our property value." A low murmur spread through the room. I glanced around at my neighbors. Some looked intrigued, others skeptical, and a few downright furious. I raised my hand, unable to hold back any longer. "Linda," I said, trying to keep my tone calm, "can you explain how much this is going to cost each of us? And what happens if the system breaks down? Or if the company we hire doesn't even work with this kind of equipment?" Linda's smile didn't waver. "Great questions. The total cost per unit will be $15,000, which can be paid in installments over the next 2 years. As for maintenance, the cranes are designed to be durable and will come with a warranty. We've done our research, and this is the best option for our community." $15,000? Mr. Grayson exploded, his face turning red. "For what? So we can have shiny windows twice a year? This is outrageous." "It's not just about the windows," Linda replied, her voice tightening. "It's about safety and compliance. We received a letter from a concerned homeowner pointing out that our current system may not meet building codes. This is about protecting ourselves from liability." "A letter?" I asked, my eyebrows shooting up. "Who sent this letter, and why wasn't it shared with the rest of us before now?" Linda hesitated for a moment, her confidence faltering. The homeowner wished to remain anonymous, but their concerns were valid. "We consulted with experts, and they agreed that upgrading our system is the responsible thing to do." "Anonymous?" Mrs. Henderson piped up, her voice trembling with indignation. "How do we know this isn't just some scare tactic? I've lived here for 20 years, and no one's ever said a word about our windows being unsafe." The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, some shouting in support of the cranes, others demanding more information. Linda tried to regain control, tapping the microphone and calling for order, but the damage was done. The divide in the room was clear, and it wasn't just about the cranes. It was about trust, transparency, and how our money was being spent. After what felt like an eternity, the vote was called. 53 in favor, 28 against. The cranes were approved. I sat there, stunned, as Linda congratulated the room on making a forward-thinking decision. Mr. Grayson stormed out, muttering something about selling his unit. Mrs. Henderson looked like she was about to cry. As I left the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Who had sent that letter? Why hadn't we seen it? And why was Linda so eager to push this through without more discussion? I decided to do some digging of my own. The next day, I knocked on Mrs. Henderson's door. She answered, still looking shaken from the meeting. "Oh, hello, dear," she said, forcing a smile. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to talk about the cranes," I said. "Do you know anything about this letter Linda mentioned? The one about the building not being up to code?" Mrs. Henderson sighed and gestured for me to come in. Her condo was cozy, filled with antique furniture and framed photos of her grandchildren. She sat down in her armchair, and I took a seat on the couch across from her. "I don't know much," she admitted, "but I do know that Linda's brother-in-law owns a construction company. I overheard her talking about it at the pool last summer. She mentioned something about big projects coming up. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now it sounds like a conflict of interest." I finished, my stomach sinking. "Do you think her brother-in-law's company is going to get the contract for the cranes?" "It wouldn't surprise me," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice heavy with resignation. "But what can we do? The vote's already been taken. We can demand transparency," I said, feeling a surge of determination. "We can ask to see the letter, the estimates, everything. If there's something shady going on, we need to know." Mrs. Henderson nodded slowly. "You're right, but be careful, dear. Linda doesn't take kindly to people questioning her authority. I left Mrs. Henderson's condo with more questions than answers. Over the next few days, I reached out to other homeowners, trying to gauge how they felt about the cranes. Some were excited, convinced that the new system would increase property values. Others were furious, feeling blindsided by the cost. A few, like me, were suspicious of Linda's motives. I decided to confront Linda directly. I caught her in the lobby one evening as she was coming back from the gym. She was dressed in workout clothes, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked surprised to see me. "Hey, Linda," I said, trying to sound casual. "Do you have a minute? I wanted to talk about the cranes." Her smile was tight. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I've been hearing some concerns from other homeowners," I said carefully, "about the cost, the maintenance, and, well, about the letter that started all of this. People are wondering why it wasn't shared with everyone." Linda's expression hardened. "The letter was shared with the board, and we acted in the best interest of the community. If people have concerns, they should bring them to the next meeting." "But why keep it anonymous?" I pressed. "If someone has concerns about the building's safety, shouldn't we all know about it?" Linda crossed her arms, her patience clearly wearing thin. "Look, I understand that change can be difficult, but this decision was made democratically. The majority voted in favor, and we're moving forward. If you have a problem with that, maybe you should consider whether this is the right community for you." Her words stung, but I refused to back down. This isn't about whether I belong here. It's about making sure we're not being taken advantage of. If there's nothing to hide, then why not show us the letter? Why not give us all the information? Linda's eyes narrowed. "I don't appreciate your tone. If you have a problem with how I'm running things, maybe you should run for the board yourself." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing there, fuming. I knew I was onto something, but I also knew that Linda wasn't going to make it easy. The fight was far from over, and I wasn't sure how far I was willing to go to get answers. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about cranes anymore. It was about power, transparency, and who really had a say in our community. And I wasn't ready to let it go. I couldn't let it go. Linda's dismissive attitude only fueled my determination to get to the bottom of what was really going on. Over the next few weeks, I started quietly reaching out to other homeowners, asking questions, and digging into the HOA's finances. It wasn't easy. Most people were either too scared of Linda to talk or didn't want to get involved. But then, I got a break. One evening, as I was sorting through old HOA meeting minutes I'd managed to get my hands on, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Is this the person asking about the cranes in the letter?" A voice whispered. It was a man's voice, low and urgent. "Yes," I said, my heart racing. "Who is this?" "I can't say too much," he replied. "But I'm on the HOA board, and I can't stay quiet anymore." Linda's lying. There was no letter. She made it up to push through the crane project. And it's not just that. She's been skimming money from the reserve fund for years. Her brother-in-law's company is going to get the contract, and they're inflating the costs. It's all a scam. I felt a mix of anger and vindication. "Do you have proof?" I asked. "I've got documents," he said. "But if I give them to you, you have to promise to take this public." "I can't be the one to do it. Linda will ruin me." "I'll do it," I said without hesitation. "Meet me tomorrow, somewhere quiet." We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop a few towns over. When I got there, I recognized him immediately. It was Greg, one of the quieter board members who always seemed to fade into the background during meetings. He handed me a manila envelope stuffed with papers. "It's all in there," he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Emails, invoices, bank statements. Everything you need to prove what she's been doing. Just be careful. Linda doesn't play fair." I spent the next few days poring over the documents. It was worse than I'd imagined. Not only had Linda fabricated the letter about the building being out of code, but she'd been siphoning money from the HOA's reserve fund for years. The crane project was just the latest in a long line of schemes to line her own pockets. I knew I had to act fast. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following week. I spent every spare moment preparing, organizing the evidence, and rallying support from other homeowners. By the time the meeting rolled around, I was ready. The room was packed. Linda stood at the front, looking as confident as ever. She called the meeting to order and started going through the agenda. When she got to the crane project, I raised my hand. "Linda," I said, standing up, "before we move forward, There's something the community needs to see. She frowned. This isn't the time for grandstanding. We have a lot to cover. Oh, I think this is exactly the time, I said, holding up the envelope. I have proof that the letter about the building being out of code was fabricated. I also have proof that you've been embezzling money from the HOA and that your brother-in-law's company is set to profit from the crane project. This isn't about safety or property values. It's about you lining your own pockets. The room erupted. People were shouting, demanding answers. Linda's face turned pale, but she tried to maintain her composure. These are baseless accusations, she said, her voice shaking. You have no right to. I have every right. I interrupted. And so does everyone here. We deserve to know where our money is going. I'm calling for an independent audit of the HOA's finances, and I'm asking for your resignation. The room was in chaos. Some people were cheering, others yelling at Linda. She tried to regain control, but it was too late. One of the other board members stood up and announced that they would be contacting the HOA's lawyer and the police to investigate the allegations. Linda looked like she was about to argue, but then she just left. She grabbed her things and walked out of the room without another word. The meeting dissolved into shouting and confusion, but one thing was clear. The truth was out, and there was no going back. As I stood there, surrounded by my neighbors, I felt a mix of relief and dread. We'd taken the first step, but the fight was far from over. The lawyers would get involved, the police would investigate, and who knew what else would come to light. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we had a chance to take back our community. And Linda? Well, let's just say her days of running the show were over. I've been in an HOA for 5 years, and this story hits way too close to home. It's always the same. Someone gets a little power, and suddenly they're making decisions that benefit themselves, not the community. Linda's brother-in-law getting the contract? That's textbook nepotism. And the fact that she made up a fake letter to scare people into voting for it? That's just evil. What's worse is how long she got away with it. How many other HOAs have presidents like her? Stealing money and lying to homeowners. This isn't just about one bad apple. It's about a system that lets this happen. I hope this story wakes people up and makes them demand more transparency from their HOAs. The part that gets me is how Linda tried to shut down anyone who questioned her. When the homeowner asked about the letter and the costs, she basically told them to leave the community if they didn't like it. That's not leadership. That's bullying. And the fact that she was giving the contract to her brother-in-law's company? That's a blatant conflict of interest. How did the board not catch that? This whole situation is a mess. And it's scary to think how long it might have gone on if the whistleblower hadn't stepped up. I hope the lawyers and cops dig deep because this feels like just the tip of the iceberg. This story is a perfect example of how power can corrupt when there's no oversight. Linda had the trust of the community, and she abused it in the worst way. Fabricating a safety letter to scare people into voting for the cranes? That's manipulative and unethical. And the fact that she was giving the contract to her brother-in-law's company is a clear conflict of interest. How did the board not see that? The whistleblower deserves so much credit for stepping up, but it's scary to think how long this might have gone on if they hadn't. I hope the lawyers and cops dig deep into the finances because this feels like just the beginning. How much money is missing? How many other projects were inflated or unnecessary? And what about the homeowners who voted for the cranes based on a lie? They deserve answers, and Linda deserves to face the consequences. This whole situation is a mess, and it's going to take a long time to untangle.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.